and was always used by Peter. In his absence, things are usually quiet on the island. The fairies take an hour longer in the morning. The beasts attend to their young. The redskins feed heavily for 6 days and nights, and when pirates and lost boys meet, they merely bite their thumbs at each other. But with the coming of Peter, who hates lethargy, they are all underway again. If you put your ear to the ground now, you would hear the whole island seething with life. On this evening, the chief horses of the island were disposed as follows. The lost boys were out looking for Peter. The pirates were out looking for the lost boys. The redskins were out looking for the pirates, and the beasts were out looking for the redskins. They were going round and round the island, but they did not meet, because all were going at the same rate. All wanted blood, except the boys, who liked it as a rule, but tonight were out to greet their captain. The boys on the island vary, of course, in numbers, according as they get killed, and so on. And when they seem to be growing up, which is against the rules, Peter thins them out. But at this time there were 6 of them, counting the twins as 2. Let us pretend to lie here among the sugar cane and watch them as they steal by in single file, each with his hand on his dagger. They are forbidden by Peter to look in the least like him, and they wear the skins of bears slain by themselves, in which they are so round and furry that when they fall, they roll. They have, therefore, become very sure-footed. The first pass is Toodles, not the least brave, but the most unfortunate of all that gallant band. He had been in fewer adventures than any of them, because the big things constantly happened just when he had stepped round the corner. All would be quiet. He would take the opportunity of going off to gather a few sticks for firewood, and then, when he returned, the others would be sweeping up the blood. The ill luck had given a gentle melancholy to his countenance, but instead of souring his nature, had sweetened it, so that he was quite the humblest of the boys. Poor, kind Toodles, there is danger in the air of you tonight. Take care, lest an adventure is now offered you, which, if accepted, will plunge you in deepest woe. Toodles. The very Tink, who is bent on mischief this night, is looking for a tool, and she thinks you the most easily tricked of the boys. Where, Tinkerbell? Would that he could hear us, but we are not really on the island, and he passes by, biting his knuckles. Next comes Nibs, the gay and debonair, followed by Slightly, who cuts whistles out of the trees and dances ecstatically to his own tunes. Slightly is the most conceited of the boys. He thinks he remembers the days before he was lost, with their manners and customs, and this has given his nose an offensive tilt. Curly is 4th. He is a pickle, and so often has he had to deliver up his person when Peter said sternly, "Stand forth, the one who did this thing," that now at the command he stands forth automatically, whether he has done it or not. Last comes the twins, who cannot be described, because we should be sure to be describing the wrong sure to meet below. A more villainous looking lot never hung in a row on execution dock. Here, a little in advance, ever and again, with his head to the ground, listening, his great arms bare, pieces of 8 in his ears, and as ornaments. He is the handsome Italian Cieco, who cut his name in letters in blood on the back of the governor at the prisoner of the prison at Goa. That gigantic black behind him has had many names since he dropped the one with which dusky mothers still terrify their children on the banks of the Gojo Mo. Here is Bill Jukes, every inch of him tattooed, the same Bill Jukes who got 6 dozen on the walrus from Flint before he would drop the bag of moidores, and Cookson, said to be Black Murphy's brother, but this was never proved, and Gentleman Starkey, once an usher in a public school, and still dainty in his ways of killing, and Skylights, Morgan's Skylights, and the Irish bosom Smee, an oddly genial man who stabbed, so to speak, without offence, and was the only nonconformist in Hook's crew, and Noodler, whose hands were fixed on backwards, and Robbed Mullins, in Alpha Mason, and many another, ruffian long known and feared on the Spanish Main. In the midst of them, the blackest and largest jewel in that dark setting, reclined James Hook, or, as he wrote himself, Jazz Hook, of whom it is said he was the only man that the sea cook feared. He lay at his ease in a rough chariot drawn and propelled by his men, and instead of a right hand, he had the iron hook with which ever and anon he encouraged them to increase their pace. As dogs, this terrible man treated and addressed them, and as dogs they obeyed him. In person he was cadaverous and black-of-eyed, and his hair was dressed in long curls, which, at a little distance, looked like black candles, and gave a singularly threatening expression to his handsome countenance. His eyes were of the blue of the forget-me-not, and of a profound melancholy, save when he was plunging his hook into you, at which time 2 red spots appeared in them, and lit them up horribly. In manner, something of the grand seigneur still clung to him, so that he even ripped you up with an air, and I have been told that he was a raconteur of repute. He was never more sinister than when he was most polite, which is probably the truest test of breeding, and the elegance of his diction, even when he was swearing, no less than the distinction of his demeanour, showed him one of a different caste from his crew. A man of indomitable courage, it was said of him that the only thing he shied at was the sight of his own blood, which was thick and of an unusual colour. In dress, he somewhat aped the attire associated with the name of Charles II, having heard it said in some earlier period of his career that he bore a strange resemblance to the ill-fated Stuarts, and in his mouth he had a holder of his own contrivance, which enabled him to smoke 2 cigars at once. But undoubtedly the grimmest part of him was his iron claw. Let us now kill a pirate to show Hook's method. Skylights will do. As they pass, Skylights lurches clumsily against him, ruffling his lace collar. The hook shoots forth. There is a tearing sound, and one screech. Then the body is kicked aside, and the pirates pass on. He has not even taken the cigars from redskins disappear as they have come, like shadows, and soon their place is taken by the beasts, a great and motley procession. Lions, tigers, bears, and the innumerable smaller, savage things that flee from them, for every kind of beast, and more particularly all the man-eaters, live cheek by jowl on the favoured island. Their tongues are hanging out. They are hungry tonight. When they have passed, comes the last figure of all, a gigantic crocodile. We shall see for whom she is looking presently. The crocodile passes, but soon the boys appear again, for the procession must continue indefinitely until one of the parties stops or changes its pace. Then, quickly, they will be on top of each other. All are keeping a sharp look out in front, but none suspects the danger may be creeping up from behind. This shows how real the island was. The first to fall out of the moving circle was the boys. They flung themselves down on the sward, close to their underground home. I do wish Peter would come back, every one of them said nervously, though in height and still more in breadth, they were all larger than their captain. I am the only one who is not afraid of the pirates, Slightly said, in the tone that prevented his being a general favourite. But perhaps some distant sound disturbed him, for he added hastily, "But I wish he would come back and tell us whether he has heard anything more about Cinderella." They talked of Cinderella, and Toodles was confident that his mother must have been very like her. It was only in Peter's absence that they could speak of mothers, the subject being forbidden by him as silly. "All I remember about my mother," Nibs told them, "is that she often said to Father, 'Oh, how I wish I had a checkbook of my own.' I don't know what a checkbook is, but I should just love to give my mother one." While they talked, they heard a distant sound. You or I, not being wild things of the woods, would have heard nothing, but they heard it, and it was the grim song. Yo ho, the pirate life, the flag of skull and bones, a merry hour of hempen rope, and hey for Davy Jones. At once, the lost boys, but where are they? They are no longer there. Rabbits could not have disappeared more quickly. I will tell you where they are, with the exception of Nibs, who has started away to reconnoiter. They are already in their home under the ground, a very delightful residence, of which we shall see a good deal presently. But how have they reached it? For there is no entrance to be seen, not so much as a pile of brushwood which, if removed, would disclose the mouth of a cave. Look closely, however, and you may note that there are here 7 large trees, each having in its hollow trunk a hole as large as a boy. These are the 7 entrances to the home under the ground, for which Hook has been searching in vain these many moons. Will he find it tonight? As the pirates advanced, the quick eye of Starkey sighted Nibs disappearing through the wood, and at once his pistol flashed out. But an iron claw gripped his shoulder. "Captain, let go," he cried, writhing. Now for the first time we hear the voice of Hook. It was a black voice. "Put back that pistol first," trees, and in a moment their captain and Smee were alone. Hook heaved a heavy sigh, and I know not why it was. Perhaps it was because of the soft beauty of the evening, but there came over him a desire to confide to his faithful boatswain the story of his life. He spoke long and earnestly, but what it was all about, Smee, who was rather stupid, did not know in the least. Anon he got the word Peter. Most of all, Hook was saying passionately, I want their captain, Peter Pan. 'Twas he cut off my arm. He brandished the hook threateningly. I've waited long to shake his hand with this. Oh, I'll tear him. And yet, said Smee, I have often heard you say that Hook was worth a score of hands for combing the hair and other homely uses. I, the captain answered, if I was a mother, I would pray to have my children born with this instead of that. And he cast a look of pride upon his iron hand, and one of scorn upon the other. Then again he frowned. Peter flung my arm, he said, wincing, to a crocodile that happened to be passing by. I have often, said Smee, noticed your strange dread of crocodiles. Not of crocodiles, Hook corrected him, but of that one crocodile. He lowered his voice. It liked my arm so much, Smee, that it has followed me ever since, from sea to sea, and from land to land, licking its lips for the rest of me. In a way, said Smee, it's a sort of compliment. I want no such compliments, Hook barked petulantly. I want Peter Pan, who first gave the brute its taste for me. He sat down on a large mushroom, and now there was a quiver in his voice. Smee, he said huskily, that crocodile would have had me before this, but by a lucky chance it swallowed a clock which goes tick, tick inside it, and so, before it can reach me, I hear the tick and bolt. He laughed, but in a hollow way. Some day, said Smee, the clock will run down, and then he'll get you. Hook wetted his dry lips. Aye, he said, that's the fear that haunts me. Since sitting down, he had felt curiously warm. Smee, he said, this seat is hot. He jumped up. Odds bobs, hammer and tongs, I'm burning. They examined the mushroom, which was of a size and solidity unknown on the mainland. They tried to pull it up, and it came away at once in their hands, for it had no root. Stranger still, smoke began at once to ascend. The pirates looked at each other. A chimney, they both exclaimed. They had indeed discovered the chimney of the home under the ground. It was the custom of the boys to stop it with a mushroom when enemies were in the neighbourhood. Not only smoke came out of it, there also came children's voices, for so safe did the boys feel in their hiding place that they were gaily chattering. The pirates listened grimly, and then replaced the mushroom. They looked around them and noted the holes in the 7 trees. Did you hear them say, Peter Pan's from home? Smee whispered, fidgeting with Johnny Corkscrew. Hook nodded. He stood for a long time, lost in thought, and at last a curdling smile lit up his swarthy face. Smee had been waiting for it. Unrip your plan, Captain, he cried eagerly. To return to the ship, Hook replied, slowly through his teeth, and cook a large, rich cake of a jolly thickness, with green sugar on it. There can be but one room below, mermaid's lagoon. These boys are always swimming about there, playing with the mermaids. They will find the cake and they will gobble it up because, having no mother, they don't know how dangerous it is to eat rich, damp cake. He burst into laughter, not hollow laughter now, but honest laughter. Aha, they will die. Smee had listened with growing admiration. It is the wickedest, prettiest policy ever I heard of, he cried, and in their exultation they danced and sang. A vast ballet when I appeared, by fear there overtook, knots left upon their bones when you have shaken claws with hook. They began the verse, but they never finished it, for another sound broke in and stilled them. It was at first such a tiny sound that a leaf may have fallen on it and smothered it, but as it came nearer, it was more distinct. Tick, 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 tick. Hook stood, shuddering, 1 foot in the air. The crocodile, he gasped, and bounded away, followed by his bosun. It was indeed the crocodile. It had passed the redskins, who were now on the trail of the other pirates. It oozed on after Hook. Once more the boys emerged into the open, but the dangers of the night were not yet over, for presently Nibs rushed, breathless, into their midst, pursued by a pack of wolves. The tongues of the pursuers were hanging out. The baying of them was horrible. Save me, cried Nibs, falling on the ground. But what can we do? What can we do? It was a high compliment to Peter that at that dire moment their thoughts turned to him. What would Peter do? They cried simultaneously. Almost in the same breath they added, Peter would look at them through his legs. And then let us do what Peter would do. It is quite the most successful way of defying wolves, and as one boy they bent and looked through their legs. The next moment is the long one, but victory came quickly, for as the boys advanced upon them in this terrible attitude, the wolves dropped their tails and fled. Now Nibs rose from the ground, and the others thought that his staring eyes still saw the wolves. But it was not wolves he saw. I have seen a wonderfuler thing, he cried, as they gathered round him eagerly. A great white bird. It is flying this way. What kind of bird do you think? I don't know, Nib said, awestruck, but it looks so weary, and as it flies it moans, Poor Wendy. Poor Wendy. I remember, said Slightly instantly. There are birds called Wendies. See, it comes, cried Curly, pointing to Wendy in the heavens. Wendy was now almost overhead, and they could hear her plaintive cry. But more distinct came the shrill voice of Tinkerbell. The jealous fairy had now cast off all disguise of friendship, and was darting at her victim from every direction, pinching savagely each time she touched. Hello, Tink, cried the wondering boys. Tink's reply rang out. Peter wants you to shoot the Wendy. It was not in their nature to question when Peter ordered. Let us do what Peter wishes, cried the simple boys. Quick, bows and arrows. All but Toodles popped down their trees. He had a bow and arrow with him, and Tink noted it and rubbed her little hands. Quick, Toodles, quick, she screamed. Peter will be so pleased. Toodles excitedly fitted the arrow to his bow. Out of the way, Tink, he shouted. face was very white, but there was a dignity about him now that had never been there before. "I did it," he said, reflecting. "When ladies used to come to me in dreams, I said, 'Pretty mother, pretty mother.' But when at last she really came, I shot her." He moved slowly away. "Don't go," they called in pity. "I must," he answered, shaking. "I am so afraid of Peter." It was at this tragic moment that they heard a sound which made the heart of every one of them rise to his mouth. They heard Peter crow. "Peter," they cried, for it was always thus that he signalled his return. "Hide her," they whispered, and gathered hastily around Wendy, but Toodles stood aloof. Again came that ringing crow, and Peter dropped in front of them. "Greetings, boys," he cried, and mechanically they saluted, and then again was silence. He frowned. "I am back," he said hotly. "Why do you not cheer?" They opened their mouths, but the cheers would not come. He overlooked it in his haste to tell the glorious tidings. "Great news, boys," he cried. "I have brought at last a mother for you all." Still no sound, except a little thud from Toodles as he dropped to his knees. "Have you not seen her?" asked Peter, becoming troubled. "She flew this way." "Ah, me," one voice said, and another said, "Oh, mournful day." Toodles rose. "Peter," he said quietly, "I will show her to you." And when the others would still have hidden her, he said, "Back, twins, let Peter see." They all stood back and let him see, and after he had looked for a little time, he did not know what to do next. "She's dead," he said uncomfortably. "Perhaps she is frightened at being dead." He thought of hopping off in a comic sort of way till he was out of sight of her, and then never going near the spot any more. They would all have been glad to follow if he had done this. But there was the arrow. He took it from her heart and faced his band. "Whose arrow?" he demanded sternly. "Mine, Peter," said Toodles, on his knees. "Oh, dastard hand," Peter said, and he raised the arrow to use it as a dagger. Toodles did not flinch. He bared his breast. "Strike, Peter," he said firmly. "Strike true." Twice did Peter raise the arrow, and twice did his hand fall. "I cannot strike," he said with awe. There is something stays my hand." All looked at him in wonder, save Nibs, who fortunately looked at Wendy. "It is she," he cried. "The Wendy lady. She's would show her the mermaids. Of course, she could not answer yet, being still in a frightful faint. But from overhead came a wailing note. "Listen to Tink," said Curly. "She is crying because the Wendy lives." Then they had to tell Peter of Tink's crime, and almost never had they seen him look so stern. "Listen, Tinkerbell," he cried. "I am your friend no more. Be gone from me forever." She flew onto his shoulder and pleaded, but he brushed her off. Not until Wendy again raised her arm did he relent sufficiently to say, "Well, not forever, but for a whole week." Do you think Tinkerbell was grateful to Wendy for raising her arm? Oh dear no, never wanted to pinch her so much. Fairies indeed are strange, and Peter, who understood them best, often cuffed them. But what to do with Wendy in her present delicate state of health? "Let us carry her down into the house," Curly suggested. "I," said Slightly, "that is what one does with ladies." "No, no," Peter said. "You must not touch her. It would not be sufficiently respectful." "That," said Slightly, "is what I was thinking." "But if she lies there," Toodles said, "she will die." "Aye, she will die," Slightly admitted, "but there is no way out." "Yes, there is," cried Peter. "Let us build a little house round her." They were all delighted. "Quick," he ordered them. "Bring me each of you the best of what we have. Cut our house. Be sharp." In a moment they were busy as tailors, the night before a wedding. They scurried this way and that, down for bedding, up for firewood, and while they were at it, who should appear but John and Michael? As they dragged along the ground, they fell asleep standing, stopped, woke up, moved another step, and slept again. "John, John," Michael cried. "Wake up! Where is Nana, John, and Mother?" And then John would rub his eyes and muttered, "It is true, we did fly." You may be sure they were very relieved to find Peter. "Hello, Peter," they said. "Hello," replied Peter amicably, though he had quite forgotten them. He was very busy at the moment measuring Wendy with his feet to see how large a house she would need. Of course, he meant to leave room for chairs and a table. John and Michael watched him. "Is Wendy asleep?" they asked. "Yes." "John," Michael proposed, "let us wake her and get her to make supper for us." But as he said it, some of the other boys rushed on, carrying branches for the building of the house. "Look at them," he cried. "Curly," said Peter in his most captainy voice, "see that these boys help in the building of the house." "Aye, aye, sir." "Build a house," exclaimed John. "For the Wendy," said Curly. "For Wendy," John said aghast. "Why, she is only a girl." "That," explained Curly, "is why we are her servants." "You, Wendy's servants?" "Yes," said Peter, "and you also. Away with them." The astounded brothers were dragged away to whack at Hugh and Carrie. "Chairs and a fender first," Peter ordered. "Then we shall build the house round them." "Aye," said Slightly. "This is how a house is built. It all comes back to me." Peter thought of everything. "Slightly," he ordered, "fetch a doctor." slightly at once and disappeared, scratching his head. But he knew Peter must be obeyed, and he returned in a moment, wearing John's hat and looking solemn. "Please, sir," said Peter, going to him, "are you a doctor?" The difference between him and the other boys at such a time was that they knew it was make-believe, while to him make-believe and true were exactly the same thing. This sometimes troubled them, as when they had to make believe that they had had their dinners. If they broke down in their make-believe, he rapped them on the knuckles. "Yes, my little man," anxiously replied Slightly, who had chapped his knuckles. "Please, sir," Peter explained, "a lady lies very ill." She was lying at their feet, but Slightly had the sense not to see her. "Tut, tut, tut," he said. "Where does she lie?" "In yonder glade." "I will put a glass thing in her mouth," said Slightly, and he made believe to do it while Peter waited. It was an anxious moment when the glass thing was withdrawn. "How is she?" inquired Peter. "Tut, tut, tut," said Slightly. "This has cured her." "I am glad," Peter cried. "I will call again in the evening," Slightly said. "Give her beef tea out of a cup with a spout to it." But after he had returned the hat to John, he blew big breaths, which was his habit of escaping from a difficulty. In the meantime, the wood had been alive with the sound of axes. Almost everything needed for a cozy dwelling already lay at Wendy's feet. "If only we knew," said one, "the kind of houses she likes best." "Peter," shouted another, "she is moving in her sleep." "Her mouth opens," cried a third, looking respectfully into it. "Oh, lovely." "Perhaps she's going to sing in her sleep," said Peter. "Wendy, sing the kind of house you would like to have." Immediately, without opening her eyes, Wendy began to sing. "I wish I had a pretty house, the littlest ever seen, with funny little red walls and a roof of mossy green." They gurgled with joy at this, for by the greatest good luck, the branches they had brought were sticky with red sap, and all the ground was carpeted with moss. As they rattled up the little house, they broke into song themselves. "We've built the little walls and roof, and made a lovely door. Tell us, Mother Wendy, what are you wanting more?" To this she answered rather greedily, "Oh, really, next I think I'll have gay windows all about, with roses peeping in, you know, and babies peeping out." With a blow of their fists they made windows, and large yellow leaves were the blinds. But roses. "Roses," cried Peter sternly. Quickly they made believe to grow the loveliest roses up the walls. "Babies." To prevent Peter ordering babies, they hurried into song again. "We've made the roses peeping out, the babies are at the door. We cannot make ourselves, you know, 'cause we've been made before." Peter, seeing this to be a good idea, at once pretended that it was his own. The house was quite beautiful, and no doubt Wendy was very cozy within, though, of course, they could no longer see her. Peter strode up and down, ordering finishing touches. Nothing escaped his eagle eye. Just when it seemed absolutely finished, "There's no knocker on the door," he said. They were very ashamed, but Toodles gave the sole of his shoe, and it made an excellent knocker. Absolutely finished now, they thought. "Not a bit of it. There's "There's no chimney," Peter said. "We must have a chimney." "It certainly does need a chimney," said John importantly. This gave Peter an idea. He snatched the hat off John's head, knocked out the bottom of it, and put the hat on the roof. The little house was so pleased to have such a capital chimney that, as if to say thank you, smoke immediately began to come out of the hat. Now, really and truly, it was finished. Nothing remained to do but to knock. "All look your best," Peter warned them. "First impressions are awfully important." He was glad no one asked what first impressions are. They were all too busy looking their best. He knocked politely, and now the wood was as still as the children. Not a sound to be heard, except from Tinker Bell, who was watching from a branch and openly sneering. What the boys were wondering was, would anyone answer the knock? If a lady, what would she be like? The door opened, and a lady came out. It was Wendy. They all wiped off their hats. She looked properly surprised, and this was just how they had hoped she would look. "Where am I?" she said. Of course, Slightly was the first to get his word in. "Wendy, lady," he said rapidly, "for you we built this house." "Oh, say you are pleased," cried Nibs. "Lovely, darling house," Wendy said, and they were the very words they had hoped she would say. "And we are your children," cried the twins. Then all went on their knees and, holding out their arms, cried, "Oh, Wendy, lady, be our mother." "Ought I?" Wendy said, all shining. "Of course, it's frightfully fascinating. But you see, I am only a little girl. I have no real experience." "That doesn't matter," said Peter, as if he were the only person present who knew all about it, though he was really the one who knew least. "What we need is just a nice, motherly person." "Oh dear," Wendy said. "You see, I feel that is exactly what I am." It is, they all cried. "We saw it at once." "Very well," she said. "I will do my best. Come inside at once, you naughty children. I am sure your feet are damp, and before I put you to bed, I have just time to finish the story of Cinderella." In they went. I don't know how there was room for them, but you could squeeze very tight in the Neverland. And that was the first of the many joyous evenings they had with Wendy. By and by, she tucked them up in the great bed in the home under the trees. But she herself slept that night in the little house, and Peter kept watch outside with drawn sword, for the pirates could be heard carousing far away, and the wolves were on the prowl. The little house looked so cozy and safe in the darkness, with a bright light showing through its blinds, and the chimney smoking beautifully, and Peter standing on guard. After a time, he fell asleep, and some unsteady fairies had to climb over him on their way home from an orgy. And of the other boys'